So, good morning to all of you. In the last class, we have studied about especially the what is biodiversity and the importance of biodiversity. So today we will move on to the next part of that. That is the principles of animal classification and then the species concept. These two things we are going to discuss today and complete that topic. So first, let me start with the animal classification. What exactly meant by animal classification? You being students of first year geology, you are expected to understand some of the very basics of animal classification. How the animals are classified, how they are named, what are the principles that are lying behind this process of classification and naming the animals or plants in general. And then in the second part, we are going to discuss about the what is species and the species concept. That we are going to discuss in the second part. So now, first, all of you know the taxonomy. In simple term, if I want to say, this is the method of organizing the living beings. We call it as taxonomy because it gives us a definite idea about the diversity of living beings. Not only that, it also gives us the information which helps us in reconstructing the entire evolutionary tree of that organism. So, for that matter, the taxonomy becomes very, very important. And understanding the taxonomy and taxonomic concept is the uh, first thing a student of biology should know because it gives information with respect to lot of evolutionary phenomenon and how that animal or a plant has evolved over a long period of time, and thus it makes the other branches of biology to understand about that organism with more clarity. It gives the classification of the animals in hierarchy uh, and explanatory value. Hierarchy in the sense which is the oldest one, which is the newest one, which is the intermediate one, or which is the uh, one which is the higher taxa, which is the lower taxa. Like that, it gives the information, and ultimately it helps us in understanding and constructing the evolutionary tree of life. So probably this is the only branch which contribute the relevant information, needed information of all the branches of biology, because no other biological branch can ignore this taxonomy. Because, so it's only because it is the base for the study for any living being and almost reflects uh, the principles and fractions of classification, and thus we will be able to understand. So it also contributes in the expansion of biology and maintains a uh, balance within the biological science. So that's why this taxonomy becomes very, very important. Now, before studying this taxonomy, what is needed is we should understand some of the glossary, that is the important terms and definition. Many times we call it as classification. What exactly meant by classification? Classification is nothing but arranging of the animals or ordering the animals or arranging the animals or plants into groups or sets on the basis of their relationship. On the basis of the relationship, we make the animals into groups or sets. And this is also associated with the contiguity and similarity or both. Uh, in the sense, the similar organisms or animals which are showing contiguity, they are put together. the others are separated from them. That is uh, based on the relationship. We forms groups or sets, and this arrangement of the animals into groups or sets based on the relationship, that is the associations by contiguity and similarity or both, we call it as classification. Second one is systematics. Systematics is a used in a larger perspective because systematics includes taxonomy also, which includes not only taxonomy, it includes classification and nomenclature also, naming them also. This systematics term has been derived from a Greek word systema, that is uh, a scientific arrangement, we can call it. So that's why the systematic is defined as the scientific study of kinds and diversity of organs, and any or who all relationship among them. So this includes two things. One is the scientific study of the kinds and diversity of the organisms, and then all relationship among them. To be more precise and short, I can say that it is the science of diversity of organisms. That is what we call systematics. Then the third important terminology is nomenclature. This term nomenclature is defined as applying distinctive names to each group which has been recognized in the classification. Because it is naming ceremony, we can say that. When the in the classification we have identified something and then it is to be named. And this particular process of naming uh, is known as the nomenclature. Now, again, many times the students get confused between taxonomy and systematics. Remember, taxonomy is only a part of systematics. Systematics is at the higher level. It's the taxonomy is the range of different areas from description, naming, classification, construction of their identification system. All these things comes under taxonomy, where different areas and different disciplines are also included here. First, naming a new taxa, that is a nomenclature, classifying them into groups, then construction of the group based on the relationships or similarities. All these things we can call it as taxonomy. Systematics traditionally includes taxonomy also. But in addition to that, theoretical and practical aspects of evolution, genetics, how the species has originated, all these things comes under the systematic. So that's why I have told you the systematics is at the higher perspective. It includes the taxonomy. In addition to that, it also includes the theories and practical aspect of understanding the evolution, genetics, and speciation. Speciation is the formation of a new species. Now, many times here we use phylogenetics or phylogeny. What do you mean by that? Phylogeny refers to the evolutionary relationship between the organisms. The evolutionary relationships between the two organisms, it is called as phylogenetics or phylogeny. Taxonomy, as I have told you, is the theory and practice of classifying the organisms. Study of classification, identification, nomenclature, and phonetic, phonistics comes under that. Usually in classification, the animals are arranged into groups. A group will have those organisms which are having common characteristics. Not only common characteristics, they should express evolutionary relationships also. Simply two organisms showing common characteristics, you cannot put that in one group. Before putting that in one group, you should make sure that evolution they do have evolutionary relationships also. If they are evolution during evolution also, if they are closely related, then they have common characteristics, then you can group them together. Then identification and determination, identifying the animals. How, though an organism may be having number of characters, for identification purpose you cannot consider all those things. But instead of that, you should 1 minute. ಸರ್ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಹೋಯ್ತು. ನಾನು ನಿಮಿಷ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ವೈಫೈ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ, ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ನಮ್ಮ ಆ, ಹ್ಮ್ you lost your nest trying to reconnect. Hope it will reconnect. ಹಲೋ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಟರ್ನೆಟ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು, ಈಗ ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಹಲೋ, ಈಗ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಹಲೋ,
ಹಾ ಸರ್
ಹಾ ಸರ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು.
ಇಷ್ಟೊತ್ತು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಟರ್ನೆಟ್ ಫೇಲ್ ಆಯ್ತು, ಈಗ ನಾನು ಇದರಿಂದ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ. ಸೊ
ಹಾ ಸರ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು.
ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ 1 minute. ಇಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಓಕೆ, we are discussing some of the terminologies. So this identification and determination is a very important aspect, because though an organism may be having number of characters, we cannot consider all those characters for the identification. Each organism will have certain key characteristics which is very unique for that. So identification refers to first identify those key characters of the animals, then recognize it, and then group them. Then the next one is nomenclature, naming the organism according to the International Code of Geological Nomenclature. That is, there is a international code for naming any organism. I will come to that later. And it has been proposed by International Code of Geological Nomenclature. Then ultimately phonistics, where the inventory of the native or neutralized animals of an area is called as fauna. So that is inventory, make them, put them in the registry, and then it is called as fauna. So the early systematics dates back to Aristotle, 3084 BC to 3022 BC. Aristotle, for the first time, classified all living organisms into two groups, that is, either plants or animals. And then he classified the animals also into two groups, land and water animals. What he called all life, regnum vegetabile. That means vegetabile means plants, regnum animalia, that is the animals. He classified them into two. In 1516 to 1565, Conrad Gessner, he brought the next level of classification. That is, not only he called it, he has described, handwritten the descriptions of the specimen, how they appear, what are the characteristics, and all those things. And especially the animal life of the new world. What is new world? In the world, we have two things. One is new world and old world. New world refers to Asia and Africa. Sorry, old world refers to Asia and Africa. New world refers to America because America was later discovered. So, especially in Africa and in Asia, this Conrad Gessner identified many species. Not only identified it, he has written the hand descriptions, photographs, or the hand drawings, and information about that organisms also. Later, it was Carl Linnaeus who lived 1707 to 1778. He is the first person to give more advanced level of classification. In his book Systema Nature, he classified the animals into six classes: Mammalia, aves, amphibia, species, insecta, and worms. This is the level of classification done by Carl Linnaeus. But all of you know that Carl Linnaeus is well known today, even today also, for introducing a system of nomenclature which is popularly known as binomial system of nomenclature. Now, what do you mean by this binomial nomenclature? Because this is the foundation for the study of any living being, either it may be plant or animal. So, even today we are following this method of naming plants and animals, and it's the most scientific method. Here, according to this binomial nomenclature, every living being, either it may be plant or animal, is given a Latin name with two parts. That's why it is known as binomial, two parts. First part is the generic name and the last part is the species name. Here I have written on Panthera tigris. Panthera is the first part, it is the generic name, that is the name of the genus. Tigris is the species name. This binomial nomenclature provides a uniform means of communication for all the people. Otherwise, remember, if in each language we call a particular plant or animal with a different name, and these names may change locally also. For example, if you have a particular fish, it is called by one name in Kumta, and the same fish may be called by other name in Mangalore. And if you go to Goa, it is called by different name. So as a result, what happens? There will be lot of ambiguity, and there is no common understanding. So that's why, in order to provide a uniform means of communication for all the people, irrespective of the geographical region, language, a special system has been developed by Carlos Linnaeus. Carlos Linnaeus. So this name is same throughout the world, wherever you go. Suppose if you say Homo sapiens, it is the human being. Any language, any place, anywhere, it is known by the same name. So here the two parts are given. One is the and uh, names are based largely on the physical appearance. When Linnaeus started it, it was mainly based on the morphology or the physical appearance. But now the modern taxonomists use genetic information, molecular biology, evolutionary relationship, lot of other criteria also classify. The especially the work of Charles Darwin introduced the idea of considering the evolutionary history, that is the phylogeny, which I have told you. So the binomial classification system is hierarchical. What do you mean by hierarchical? At the top level, there will be kingdom, followed by that there's phylum. Next, there will be class. After that, orders, families, genus, and species. A kingdom may have number of phylum. A single phylum may have number of classes. Single class may have number of orders. Single order may have number of families. Single family have number of genus, and single genus can have number of species. Each of these level is called as taxon. Plural is known as taxon. So, uh, see here, this is the linear hierarchy. Kingdom divided into classes, classes divided into orders, orders divided into genus, genus into species, and lastly species into variety. This is a modern classification. We have added many more things to what the uh, Linnaeus has suggested. See, kingdom divided into phylum, phylum into classes, class into subclass, subclass into infraclass, infraclass into orders, orders into suborders, suborders into superfamily, superfamily has family, family, subfamily, then subfamilies may be having tribe, tribes may be having genus, genus may be having species, species may be having subspecies, and subspecies may be having varieties. This is the modern classification, but the principle is same. So, what is the importance of this animal classification? Probably, in one term, if I want to say, it makes sense of animal world around us. Otherwise, understanding both the animals as well as the plants would have been much difficult. So that's why it's a very important tool which helps to identify the taxa, mainly based on the relationship among the groups of animals. And it gives us or it helps us to gather knowledge about the animal kingdom within minimum time or less labor. Suppose if you even in Google, if you want to search the information about the particular um, um, tiger, Panthera tigris, you can write. Otherwise, we don't know. And what are the here in Kannada? If you want to know, you have to write Puli or in some in English tiger like that. It changes. But now, if you use one word, Panthera tigris, whatever the information available on Panthera tigris, irrespective of the language, it will appear. Geographical place, it will appear. So that's why it has helped us in understanding the animals with minimum time and less labor. And it provides most relatively stable, unique, and unequivocal names for newly identified animals. So many animals are being identified. Now, then, how to name them? Newly identified ones. But this classification system has a definite way of naming them. So that's why there is no problem. And it also helps us in understanding the evolutionary relationships between different groups of animals. And even we can select the economically important species. In modern science, even helps in economically in pest control because we know if we have a classification of pests, what are the pesticides we can use, how it can be used, what is the quantum of pesticide to be used. All those things will be easy for us. Even in modern hybridization, artificial breeding of animals to improve the quality, especially in poultry or dairy, this classification helps us. Even for conservation, management, sustainable management of the biodiversity. First, knowledge about this classification is very, very important. So that's why it's not wrong if I say the animal classification serve as a base for development of other biological sciences. Now, what is expected to know here is we should know the rules of binomial nomenclature. Already you must be knowing, still I am rebrushing your memory because you being the students of biology should be very cautious while writing the scientific name of the any animals or plant, and you should follow that rules. What are the rules? Each animal should have only one scientific name. You cannot have two, three scientific names. One should have only one scientific name. And the same name should not be used for two or more species under the same genus. You should not use the same name for more than one species under the same genus. What do you mean by this? Okay, for example, I will take the example of a fish. Puntius ticto. Puntius is the generic name, ticto is the species name. Under this genus Puntius, only one species you can use the term ticto, Puntius ticto. If you have another different species, you should give a different name. You cannot use the same name ticto under the same genus again. But in a different genus, you can use it. Suppose if it is not a Puntius genus, that particular fish may be belonging to another genus, say Labi genus. There you can again use the ticto. But the species name should not be repeated under the same genus. And each binomial name should have two parts, which all of you know that. First part refers to the generic name, second part to the species name. And every scientific name should be written in Latin or it should be Latinized because Latin is a dead language. Again, it is not going to change. So you might have been knowing. So all these things are Latin names. Or if not, it should be Latinized. How to make it Latinized? I can give an example. Suppose a person, say Mr. Butt, has identified a new species and Mr. Butt wants to give his name to that species because it's a totally new species. Say a new species of monkey if he has identified and he wants to give his name to that monkey. How he can give that? Species, generic name that monkey he has identified belongs to the genus Macaca. Okay, there is no problem. Already Macaca genus is there. He can say that it belongs to genus Macaca. But what is the species? How to use the species name? He wants to give his name. So can he put Macaca? But no, it should be Latinized. So that's why what he has to do is Macaca Battier. He can make it. But is Latinized by making it Battier. So this is how they are Latinized. So both the names should be printed in italics. If you print it, it should be italics, both generic name and species name. Suppose if you are using handwritten letters, then italicizing will be difficult. Then you have to underline them. So see here, Felice Dio, it is italicized. So suppose if you are unable to italize it, you have to underline it. But remember, genus and species should be underlined separately. There is a gap. How much gap should be there between Genus and species, only one word gap. You should be able to insert one word. Only that one space should be there. Then the genus name should start with a capital letter C. Felis, Leo. It is the name, scientific name of lion. F, it should be capital. And the species name should start with lowercase or the small letter. Generic name or genus name should start with a capital letter and the species name should start with small letter. Then at the end, name of the scientist who has first identified and described the species should be abbreviated at the end. For example, Homo sapiens is the scientific name given to human beings by Linnaeus. So that's why what is whenever you write Homo sapiens, in the bracket you write L. L stands for Linnaeus. The name of the scientist who has first defined should be written. According to this law of priority, scientific name of an animal should be acknowledged, which first published in the international journal. If the name is first time given by Linnaeus, always Homo sapiens should follow with the Linnaeus. Suppose after 100 years, one more person may call it as Homo sapiens. No, then you cannot give his name. Sometimes generic and species name may be same. See here, Katla Katla. Katla Katla is a fish. Generic name and species name are same. When the generic name and species name are same, it is known as tautonyms. And then, as per the rules of this nomenclature, the specimen which is used as a sample for identification and naming, it should be always preserved in the laboratory. Because if anybody wants to cross check it, it should be made available. So that's why it is to be stored or kept in the laboratory. Then the any name who has proposed the animal according to a rule of nomenclature, that person name is known as available name. Available name. But actually it is not a valid name. Because what happens, there are many instances where a particular organism has been identified long back. Later, people have forgotten it. After 100 years, another person identifies that. In that case, we start calling that animal with this present person. But suppose after some times, if we are able to recognize that 100 years before that somebody has identified it means, then the credit goes to the first person who has identified. Sometimes if the proposed name is identical in spelling, but they belong to different taxon, then they are called as homonyms. Either it is synonyms, the person who has proposed for the first time with a valid scientific name is known as synonym. See here, according to law of priority, only the senior homonym or synonyms are approved and valid names. Afterwards, so many persons have described, discovered it, or whatever may be the things, but they don't have any weightage. Law of priority says that the first properly published name should be given the preference. So these are some of the principles of classification and rules of binomial nomenclature. Now Let's try to understand the another part of the same topic, species concept. All of you know, species is the fundamental unit of classification or the basic unit of classification. Our classification starts with species. Then, what exactly meant by a species? Remember, there is no absolute definition for species. The definition of species may change from scientist to scientist, and a holistic definition is not possible even till today. But whatever we call species definition is the most accepted definition, that's all. It is not the perfect definition, but it is the most accepted definition. Probably, whatever the definition that you are reading, even you must have studied about it even in your high schools or even in your PUC also. So, what is species according to that? Most inclusive group of individuals that actually or potentially interbreed and can produce fertile offsprings. To call any individual a species, it should qualify these characters. It should be an exclusive group of individuals, unique group of individuals. You cannot say two, three varieties and group and call it as a species. No, it should be an inclusive group of individuals without having any ambiguity among them. That means all the members should show certain uniqueness in their characteristics, which are unique to that group. That's the most inclusive group. Okay. Then the second character is they should be actually or potentially inbred. They should be able to undertake the reproduction among their members only. Actually, if they may be interbreeding, or at least if they are not interbreeding right now, they should have every potential aspect of interbreeding. Actually, when they are in group, they will interbreed. Why I am talking potentially? Sometimes what happens is there may be individuals of the same species spread in two, three different locations. To give for your better understanding, I can give an example. All of you have seen the elephants. In Karnataka, we have elephants in two areas. One is in the southern part, that is Mysore, Mandya, Coorg, that is Nagarhole, Bandipur, all those areas. And another area where you see the elephants is Dandeli. Both of them are elephants. But do they actually interbreed? Whether an elephant from Dandeli can breed with the elephant which is in Nagarhole? No, because they are geographically separate. But suppose if you take an elephant from Dandeli and leave it in Nagarhole, then it can interbreed with the elephants which are there. That means not only actually, if they are potentially able to interbreed, they are called as species. Not only that, that's also third thing. And they produce fertile offspring. Not only they interbreed and reproduce, whatever the offsprings they produce, even they should be able to reproduce. Even they should be able to reproduce. Then only you can call it a species. What does it mean? Can produce fertile offsprings. Is there any doubt? Okay. All of you know mule. Mule ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಸರುಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. What is mule? It's a cross between ass and donkey. Sorry, donkey and horse. Donkey and horse, male donkey and female horse. When they mate, they can produce the mule. Now you tell me. Now do you call donkey and horse as the same species because they are actually interbreeding them and they are reproducing? No, because the mule is infertile. You cannot ask the mules will not interbreed and produce another mule. If you want to, if you want the mule, it should be the cross between donkey and horse. So that's why mule is not a fertile offspring. So that's why we do not consider horse and donkey as one species, but they are considered as two different species. Okay. Now in the species concept, there are different types. Evolutionary species, where evolutionary biologists will define the species based on the evolutionary history of that. Ecological species concept is different. An ecologist will define the species based on the ecological consequences. Genotypic cluster species, where a genetist will call a species based on its genetic makeup. So, like that, there are different things. But the most accepted one is the biological species concept. What is this biological species concept? Species are the groups of interbreeding natural population. This is very, very important. Species are the groups where they interbreed, but it should be a natural population, not a forced population, artificial population, but should be a natural population where they interbreed. At the same time, they are reproductively isolated from each other. Any such group, they can interbreed among the members of the same species. They cannot interbreed with the members of other species. They are reproductively isolated from other such groups. That unit. For example, take one frog, Rana tigrina. Rana tigrina is a interbreeding natural population. Not only interbreeding natural population, they are reproductively isolated from any other groups of frog. Except Rana tigrina, they will not reproduce with any other group. Suppose Rana tigrina is one species, Rana pipiens is there. The members of the Rana tigrina will not undertake the reproduction with Rana pipiens. Or Rana pipiens will not reproduce using the Rana tigrina because they are reproductively isolated. So such groups are known as biological species concept. And it's a potential mate and seek each other for the purpose of reproduction. And they are reproductively isolated. Ecological species, here we do not consider, regardless of the individuals, a species is a unit of interacting population within a ecosystem. That's what, which share the same environment, which are the same ecological niche. They call it as ecological species. A genetist will define the species what is known as genetic species. It consists of large intercommunicating gene pool. The members which are sharing the same gene pool, they are called as species. If the members sharing the genes of the same gene pool, then they are called as one species. That is the genetic species. So there are so many definitions. Linnaeus conceived species is an unchangeable unit. But Lamarck and Darwin put some evolutionary thoughts in that. What they suggested was the species undergo modification with course of time in order to adapt to the nature, themselves to the ecological niches, and gradually from one form other species under favorable conditions. That I will come later. Another genetist, Dobzhansky, in 1937, defined the species a group of individuals which, while passing through the ordeal of evolution, has been physiologically and genetically incompatible of interbreeding with other groups of individuals. He said that these are the individuals which are passing in the different ordeal of evolution, but they are physiologically and genetically incompatible of interbreeding with other groups. They are compatible, only interbreed with the members of the same group, and they are incompatible to undertake the reproduction with the members of the other individuals. Emerson in 1941 defined species that it has evolved by reproductive isolation and genetically distinct group of natural population. What do you mean by they are reproductively isolated? They do not undertake the reproduction with the other members. So that's why they undertake the reproduction within the members of the same group. As a result, they become genetically distinct. Mayer in 1963 defined the species as group of actually or potentially interbreeding natural population which are morphologically distinct. Their external appearance should be distinct, and they are reproductively isolated from neighboring natural groups. Same thing with same. Idea is same. Simpson, an evolutionary biologist, in 1961, he called species as a lineage. What is lineage? An ancestral descendant sequence of population. A population which has descended from the ancestors over a long period of time, which has evolved separately from others. A group which has evolved separately with its own evolutionary role because they have their own evolutionary role and tendencies. In most recently in 1995, Christopherson, he said a species is a single lineage, single line of evolution of ancestral descendant sexual population genetically integrated by historically contingent events of interbreeding. This is called as ontological species concept. It's a single lineage which undertakes the sexual reproduction, and they are genetically so integrated because of the evolution. They do not undertake the interbreeding with other groups. Then in a species, there are different types. Allopatric species. Two or more related species related species, but they are living in different geographical ranges. For example, the lion, Indian lion and African lion, they are allopathic species. Basically, they were same, but because of the geographical isolation, they have become two separate species. This is called as allopathic species. Another one, the sympatric species. These are basically two or more species. But when their geographical distribution overlap, they may segregate into different ecological niches. Living in the same ecological area, in the same area, when it starts overlapping, they may segregate into two different niches. Niches are the feeding and breeding ground. In the same ecosystem, the two species will live, but occupying different ecological niches. For example, fig frog and gopher frog. Then parapatric species. These are the species which live in two different geographical areas with a very narrow margin of overlap. This type of parapatric species are found in Australian grasshoppers. Sibling species. Two or more groups which are closely related species. Even morphologically also they look alike. But when you study their behavior and reproductive pattern, they are isolated. For example, in Drosophila persimilis and Drosophila pseudo-obscura, very difficult to differentiate by very closely related, morphologically also same. But behaviorally, they are different. They do not reproduce among themselves. So, such species are called sibling species. Then, cryptic species, which are alike morphologically, but sexually and genetically they are different. Then, monotypic species. A genus includes single species but does not include any subspecies. Polytypic species, a species contain two or more subspecies in that. For example, Indian tiger we call Panthera tigris tigris. The Chinese tiger we call as Panthera tigris amoyensis. Siberian tiger we call as Panthera tigris altacia. Like that. These are the subspecies. Then endemic species. I have already told you. I'm not going to the species with restricted range. Then transient species. This is appearing in the evolution. Evolution, all of a sudden you cannot expect that to happen. There will be some transitional form between the ancestral and modern this one. That is, they are called a transition species. Another one is agamo species, a species which do not have uniparental organism. Especially this happens if the eggs are produced by parthenogenesis. For example, in bees, wasps, rotifers, eggs develop into haploid individuals and haploid eggs parthenogenetically if they are not fertilized by the sperm. Then, okay, these are the different things, species which we are not going to discuss here. Uh, so, this is about the species concept and uh, the binomial rules of nomenclature. Is it clear? ಏನ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತಾ?